Council Urban Affairs Committee meeting to order. It is 7:55. We're a little behind schedule, but we will make amends. We have one item on our agenda, order number 22-24, 108-694E, communication from David Roach, P.E. Procopio Companies, on behalf of Marlborough TOTG and JW Capital Partners, LLC, to amend the site plan decision for the mixed-use project located at 57 Main Street in the Marlborough Village District, pursuant to the March 6, 2024 settlement agreement, as well as the March 12, 2024 order for remand in case number 23, MISC 000199, the order. I believe Mr. Roach is here with some other people. We have multiple chairs if you'd like to come up to the well. If you speak, make sure that those lights on those microphones are on green. I think they're all lit. I will give you an opportunity to speak in a few minutes. I just want to take care of a couple of items of business. First of all, I want to make sure that the council is all aware what we are discussing is the stapled packet from Priscilla Ryder dated Thursday, May 16th at 5:29 p.m. I know many of you have multiple things in your mailboxes. Make sure that is what you have in front of you, along with a horizontal bunch of stapled papers with the cover sheet 57 Main Street, and unfortunately our clerk is not here, so we don't have the screen, and the beautiful pictures in this PowerPoint will not be shown for the public, but I believe they will be on the website. Are they included in the packet? This?
So, Madam Chair, no, they're not in the packet. They were late arriving. We can put them on the website for the posting if that's...
Anybody looking for them. All right, quickly, I am just going to read, and I believe we read it at a council meeting, but I just want to go through it. The letter from Solicitor Grossfield. Dear Honorable President Ossing and Councilors, this email is to advise regarding next steps with respect to the above referenced matter following the Land Court's order on joint motion of remand. The remand order returns the matter to the City Council for review of a request to amend the April 25th, 23 site plan approval with conditions consistent with the settlement agreement dated March 6th, 2024. It's my understanding that this afternoon Marlborough TOTG LLC and JW Capital Partners submitted the request to amend the site plan to the council. In my opinion, the request to amend site plan appears consistent with the settlement agreement, subject to review of the amended plan set and placing the amended site plan approval decision in proper legal form. In summary, the settlement agreement called for a submittal of a set of revised site plans based upon agreed to modifications that include, number one, showing compliance with the Marlborough Village zoning district purpose and design standards, including increased use of brick exterior facade and distinct top and cornice articulation with emphasized corner. Number two, increasing number of on-site parking spaces to no less than 80 parking spaces as required by the zoning ordinance with no payment in lieu of on-site parking allowed. And three, no use of city-owned Bolton Street parking lot for off-site parking. Recommended next action. At this time, the City Council may refer the request to the amend site plan for administrative site plan review. Consistent with the remand order, the City Council shall complete review and issue a decision on the request by June 17th. As the remand order states, within 40 days from the date of plaintiff's submittal to the City Council, the City Council shall complete a meeting on the proposed modifications to the prior site plan approval and issue a decision on the request to amend the site plan approval with conditions. Please contact me if you have any questions. So what we have in the packet that I talked about is the amended site plan with those revised conditions, along with some requests by site plan, official site plan, who had a meeting earlier. We'll also read Priscilla's letter. The Site Plan Review Committee provided comment to the applicant for the 57 Main Street housing project. We've worked together this afternoon and they've incorporated all our comments into a final draft attached. They are shown in red on the attached recommended permit conditions. Overall, the Site Plan Review Committee had no issues with the revised plans as presented, as they meet the zoning and technical reviews. We believe the attached recommended conditions should help to ensure the project is built properly and addresses this committee's concerns. There are a few comments we would like to discuss with you tonight, which are listed below and aren't incorporated into the draft. From City Engineer Tom DePercio, we recommend when the project is complete that it include signage that directs vehicles exiting the new High Street driveway left turn only toward Bolton, and signage that directs vehicles exiting the new Exchange Street driveway right turn only, to minimize traffic at the High Exchange intersection and minimize traffic proceeding down High Street toward Brown. The applicant indicated they wanted to discuss this with you tonight. Bill Payton, Assistant Building Commissioner, the plan set needs to include a lighting plan, and the applicant indicated these will be added to the final set. How does stair 1 egress occupants get out of the building in an emergency? It appears that the occupants must go back into the building at the lowest level rather than egressing directly out of the building. Please clarify. The applicants indicated this is minor and they will address this during the building permit process. And they have added language about pest control under C7. However, our standard language is as follows and should be included. A pest control plan shall be submitted to the Board of Health for review and approval prior to construction to ensure pests are controlled prior to demolition and throughout construction. And Conservation does have a meeting, or I believe that Ms. Ryder would be at the meeting tonight. So with that, I'm going to let Mr. Roach take over, introduce who you have with you tonight, and if you want to do the PowerPoint or anything else that you want to begin with.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and Mr. President. My name is David Roach, the Vice President of Development with the Procopio Companies. With me here tonight is Michael Meduno, who is our design lead, and Will Nuccio, who is our day-to-day project manager on this project. We're probably all new faces to most of you, and I don't know how many of you were present during the initial iteration of this last year. I know most of the members are familiar with the project as it was initially brought through this committee and the council. So I just, I apologize if there's any backstory that you may not be clear on if you're not. I was not present as part of that here in those hearings. I was back in the office. Chris from our office was representing us. We were not the original proponent of this project. JW Capital still is, and we still have assumed control of the project from them. We've been working together on an agreement. We were really interested in pushing and pursuing this project forward. We believe in Marlborough. And I'll be honest with you, after walking through here tonight and seeing the downtown and it's buzzing and there's people eating outside and seeing the improvements being made at the back of City Hall, really excited about bringing a project forward in this downtown. It's a really nice place, and I'm really glad to be here. So with that being said, we had an opportunity as we were, we didn't agree with some of the decisions that were made in the original decision and some of the conditions, but we had an opportunity to through a negotiation with you to make some adjustments, and we're really happy with the way this proposal landed, because I do think it is a better project. We do think that more parking at the project would be better for both us and for the city, and I do think that it is a much more handsome building as a result of it and giving it another look. So I'll walk you guys through that, but thank you for having us here. So the conditions that were kind of in question, and they really reflect what I believe are some of the things that were expressed to the design team throughout that process, where that the design didn't really adequately reflect the design guidelines that were set forth as part of the both the overlay district, as well as just there's a design document. And I believe part of the reason that was probably overlooked during the process because there was such a focus on the parking. And I think that, we're happy to have been able to take another look, because the building does look better, in my opinion, through taking some time to really emphasize the things that were asked for in the design guidelines. There was a strong desire not to use the Bolton Street lot. I've actually had an opportunity to drive through here during the day, and I can understand why. It's busy with the school across the street. I could see why that was a concern. And a desire to increase the on-site parking to at least 60 parking spaces. Again, I could understand the desire for that. The reason that the proposal previously really struggled to get to the point where it could meet that parking demand need was that there was a belief that there was no real ability to go beyond 52 feet in height in totality for the building. In reality, the zoning allows up to 70 by right and 84 by special permit. We're not here and we're not proposing to go anywhere near that limit, but when I had an opportunity to take a second look at this and knowing parking was the concern, parking doesn't require a lot of height. Retail and restaurant space does. And the original proposal, by trying to stay under 52 feet, had a small retail space out front. If you flip to this, I believe it's the third page where you can kind of see the front of the building side by side in the previous proposal. And in this proposal, the lower level was pretty small, which I don't think would be great for a restaurant, which I know was a desire to have in the space, or at least some good retail. And it limits you to one level of parking in the back. By just growing the size of the building, I think by zoning it was about 7 feet taller. And I'm not going to sit here and say that's a small amount of height added, but it's well within what's allowed by zoning. By making that change, not adding residential, not getting more for the development, but getting the parking and also improving the retail space, we're able to, what I think, produce a project that I think is much better for Marlborough, better for us, better for this project, and I think it's a great resolution. The architecture, admittedly, was fairly bland in the original proposal. I can't say that I personally had a lot of input on that. Mike wasn't part of our company at that point in time. He really leads our design efforts. And we pushed the architect to really work harder towards putting higher quality materials on the building in a way that better reflects the red brick grand buildings of Marlborough. We can't recreate that easily on a new construction building. It just doesn't fit the form, but it is more of its place here in Marlborough. So we're really happy with how that looked at. So if you flip to the next page, this shows the corner that you see as you arrive downtown. And one of the things that I think was missed as part of the previous design and the thought process on this is our design team really focused on the Exchange Street and Main Street corner as the primary view of this building, but in reality, most people are going to experience it looking across the common. So we wanted to make sure that that corner also had some emphasis to it. The brick now wraps around the side. I know we have put some proposals forth before the council as part of the negotiation that did not bring the facade treatment all the way back on that side, and now we do. What is not reflected in these renderings, because we really can't do that easily, is the trees that exist on the common. There is a substantial amount of trees that will screen that back courtyard area from the public view pretty well. And we're committed to, during construction, delineating the drip lines of those trees and making sure that we don't impact them, because we do think they're an asset both to Marlborough and to this project. And now most of those do exist within the common, so obviously those will be retained, but some of them are right along the property line, and we're going to do our best to retain those as well. We think those, you cannot replace a tree easily, so we're going to focus on maintaining those. So I think when you look at this, and you could imagine the trees covering up kind of the back left-hand half of this, that I do think that this building will fit in well, and those trees are of grand scale and will really work to balance this building out. If you flip to the next side, it shows an elevation along Exchange Street. And this just helps illustrate how we were able to get to the additional parking within the zoning. There is a limit of the building height to 52 feet within 50 feet of the residential zone. In practicality, it's much less than 52 feet because that 52 feet is measured from the grade around the whole building. And at the back of the building, it's less than that. It's in the 40s. I don't know the exact number. It varies along High Street. But it will remain within that scale of 50, no greater than 52 feet by zoning definition. The top level will be pulled back further from High Street because before we didn't need to actually pull back that full distance because the whole building was under that limit, and now we're pulling it back to maintain compliance with zoning. We've reviewed this with the building commissioner and agrees that this is in compliance with zoning. And there's just more views. You can then flip to the next page and you'll see the rear of the building. And the front and the rear of the building, excuse me. The front of the building, I think, is, as we mentioned before, doing a better job of emphasizing the ground floor space in the retail. It could be one or two tenants. We haven't, obviously tenanted this building. We have a strong desire to have a quality tenant in here. We did not run the math on the economics of this project, assuming we're going to get big rent here. It's more focusing on the right rent. We agree with the desire to have a restaurant of food and beverage. I think it's going to fit well with the proposed project because the tenants, it's something that they're going to want to see as well. And I think it fits well with Marlborough. I know there's concerns about the types of retailers that we have in here. We don't have a desire to have, national tenants in here that aren't fitting with it. I know cell phone stores, things like that. It's not our desire. We really want to make it something that meshes well with our project and is something that the tenants would desire. If you look at the rear of the building, which is on the right-hand side of the page, what we have added there, and this is how we were able to achieve the additional level of parking, is a separate entrance off of High Street. So in the previous proposal, all the parking entrance was on Exchange. This allows, there's two levels of parking, and all this parking is for the residents, so everyone will have their own spaces. The spaces will be assigned to residents. So you'll know which door you go in and out depending on where your parking space is. So there's approximately 32 spaces on an upper level that would be accessed via that rear door, which is the left-hand gray space. What I do want to note, and this plan does not accurately reflect where we're probably going to land after talking with the fire department. That was part of the comments. They want to see the garage as open as possible for ventilation purposes. So one of the conditions that we've proposed in here to amend the initial order of conditions is to allow for us some flexibility to maximize the amount of openings along that facade, because that was a desire of the fire department to allow smoke to clear the garage. In summary, when we went back and looked at the design guidelines, if you flick to the next page, we looked at what the design guidelines call for, and they call for a moderate scale structure. Now, obviously, that is a term that not everyone would agree on what moderate scale means. The zone allows for 84 feet. Now, admittedly, that's by special permit. By right is 70. We weren't certainly going to try to push anywhere near that limit, and I know psychologically having a number that is less than 60 is one of those things that I think just sounds better, and we did our best to try to stay under that. Now, that's going to be a question of how you measure grade and finality, but we're trying to stay right around that number just because we're trying to just not ask for, this wasn't an ask for more apartments, more space. This was just to get the parking in. And as a result, it also made, as I mentioned, the retail space better. Articulating the base, middle, and top. So the past, if you were to flip back at the old images, or if you can remember them, the past plan had a ground floor space that was really, really dwarfed by the upper four floors. I got to remember that number here. And that was all one facade treatment all the way to the top. The current plan actually has a change in facade treatment at the bottom level, the top level, and in the middle. And that's a more traditional way of organizing the architecture of a building. It breaks down the massing. It gives it a top, a hat, however you want to describe it. It makes it feel like it's completed. So we emphasize that. And the base is now an appropriate height, so it doesn't feel like it's this little base underneath. It actually is. It sits on a strong base. Reducing the building bulk, the building always had these kind of angled things that went in and out to make the facade not one long run. But what we actually did is change the facade material on those spaces so that it actually really does vary the look of the building along the sides. And then we emphasize the corners, but especially the corner at Exchange, because that's really closer to where the main entrance is, with a bay projection, which is a more traditional thing to have on a building of this type. The roof form, now it is a flat roof. The building is tall. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's a short building. It is a tall building, which will screen the HVAC equipment from the view of the public down below. The way we manage that, and this is an all-electric building. It'll have heat pumps. Heat pumps have those kind of suitcase-shaped air conditioning units on the outside. We push all those to the middle of the roof. The roof's 65 feet wide. We push them to the middle. It brings them out of view. The remainder of that roof will likely have solar panels on it. All of our projects, we pursue solar on the roof. I know that was something that had been discussed. I wasn't part of that discussion during the past project. It's certainly something we will be doing. Especially this is a National Grid city, and National Grid has, some pretty good incentives for that. So there's a lot of motivation there financially, as well as just the right thing to do. So we will be including solar on the roof. That does make it so you're not going to put an additional screen around the roof, which would make the building look taller, but it also would limit our ability to install solar on the roof. So the best way to screen the HVAC is just to push it to the middle. The materials, as we mentioned, the design guidelines said the predominant materials shall be red brick, stone, or precast materials. We're not adjacent to residential districts. We're putting a lot of red brick on this building, more so than our initial proposals. The first proposals were not a red brick. We pushed them towards a red brick. The other thing that we did on the outside, and this was something that we had to work with our architect on, was to get rid of the cream color. I didn't like that. I don't think many people like that. It was an opportunity for me to get away from that. It just didn't go. It didn't go with brick. It didn't go with downtown Marlborough. So we added, as I mentioned previously, we added brick, wrapping it around to the side of the building. I don't think there's a lot to talk about in terms of off-street parking now, because there isn't any off-site parking. There isn't any. The initial approval for this project included a requirement of 60 spaces. I'm actually happy because of adding that additional level. We were able to get it to, I think we're right around 82 now. We were initially, I thought we were at 84. We're at 82. As the design refines, we think we can stay at that number. The conditions require no less than 80, which is our minimum to be zoning compliant. So we will hard commit to not having off-site parking as part of how we're going to meet zoning, but also we're going to try to get as much on-site as we can. Part of achieving compliance is a commitment to having a car share vehicle on the property. We do have an agreement with a vendor, and I'm blanking on the name of that vendor, but we will obviously produce evidence of that as part of our building permit application, and we will designate a space for that car. It will not be Zipcar. Zipcar really doesn't even go outside of Boston anymore. It will be a service that that manages it for the building, but the building will own the vehicle, and it's available to residents to manage the need for single occupancy vehicle trips and the need to have cars for the residents. So obviously we will not be doing any fee in lieu and any off-site parking. The next plan shows how we achieved the additional parking. On the left was the previous proposal. The building was, for lack of a better term, a C shape. Half of it was residential space and the retail, and then the left half towards High Street was the 28 parking spaces. On the right-hand side, what you'll see is we turned the parking area into a parking loop configuration, which is better for circulation. It did result in a reduction in the outdoor amenity space for the residents. While that is and this is a simplified version of the plan, the actual plans do have better detail of landscaping, and I don't think this actually does it justice. But it did reduce the outdoor amenity space available to the residents, but not in a way that I think is going to be detrimental to the project overall. And it is located further towards the rear where the hill of the common rises, so it is a bit more buried and screened by the hillside of the common, which will then also have a screen fence on top of it. Between the amenity space and the parking, what is not reflected on the plan you see in front of you, but is in the plan submitted as part of site plan review, is there is a 20-foot buffer between that outdoor space and the parking that will have a screen fence and vegetation to further screen the parking from view of the park and the residents. Above that is the upper level parking, and that lives within the building entirely, and it's accessed from the left-hand side of that upper level. You see the curb cut off of High Street. So as we mentioned, it increases the interesting flipping of the numbers from 28 to 82 spaces. Obviously, as I mentioned, it required a reduction in the residential amenity space. The retail area is reduced from 5,000 square feet to 3,500 square feet. Although that is a reduction, it still maintains the same amount of frontage along High Street. 3,500 square feet is a good number for a restaurant space. It could be divided into two smaller tenants. It could be an ice cream shop. It could be, we don't know who that tenant is. We want to make sure it's a tenant that is going to mesh well with the property itself for us, and we think that that's also going to be a mutual benefit to the city of Marlborough. So that is our summary of the presentation. And before you, I believe, mentioned we have the letter from Priscilla. There are comments in here, if it's appropriate to discuss, we're willing to discuss. One thing that Mike did point out as he was reading through the conditions is there is a typo in here that we're going to need to get corrected that just says that we will not increase the bedroom count beyond 92 bedrooms. Actually, that is the number of units. The bedroom count is higher. So we should correct that in here. What I didn't emphasize during this presentation is, as part of this design and the step back of the building, we actually reduced the unit count from 99 to 92. So that's also something that I glossed over. So there are a few less units, and that did help to allow us to get this project to be parked all within the site. So with that, I appreciate your time. I'm really, happy to be in a position where I think we're presenting something that is much improved over what was initially proposed to you, and I'd love to hear your feedback.
All right, I'm going to open it up now if anybody has questions or comments at this point after that presentation. Councilor Doucette?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I agree, this was a dramatic change. The old design versus the new design. It's very impressive in look and structure. I think, putting in the second layer of parking alleviates a lot of the concern that we had. So, and thank you for that. I think that was important. Overall, I think that it would be a improvement. It would be improvement to what's there now, even though it's going to be taking most of the property that's there. It's going to be a monolith, however you want to put it. You said the whole thing's going to be heat pumps?
Yes.
Okay. Have you guys looked into geothermal? Because while you're doing construction, there's a company called Dandelion Energy that's actually based in Marlborough. You should look them up, just saying. Because I think the heat exchange, it's great for air conditioning, but heating can be really expensive when it gets really cold. So that's just something as far as operating costs that you guys need to be aware of. And is there going to be charging stations for electric vehicles? I'm not necessarily looking at, expansion opportunities, not necessarily that it's there now.
So yes, there will be. That's part of the compliance with the energy code. The primary concern with EV charging right now, and we're running into this in many municipalities, is the potential fire risk, which was the primary concern of the fire department during the site plan review process. To alleviate the concern, and the extra layer of parking actually helps with this, the EV parking will be limited to the lowest level to create a layer of separation between the residents and those spaces. They will be located towards the rear along the wall in the lowest level. And that's also the reason for the desire to have it be as open as possible and allow it to breathe. But we are committed to having EV parking. As far as geothermal, I'm sure my friends here will get a chuckle out of this. I have geothermal in my house, and it's an older system at this point. And I'm actually considering going back just to an air source heat pump because of the complexity and the cost of upkeep over time. And so I'd love to talk to you about it offline and the challenges I've had. But in a building of this scale, where everything is individually billed to the tenants, individual control is the goal, and a network system creates a great deal of complication, both in terms of billing and in terms of the system itself. It's just a much, much more complicated system on a multi-family building, more complicated than the one I have. So I'm certainly not dismissive of it, and I do understand in the winter, the coefficient of performance is far superior, but the trade-offs in terms of the cost of upkeep make it really challenging to make that economically viable. So it's something that we have in my mind, and I want to find a way to make it happen, but right now it's pretty difficult.
Okay. Can I follow on?
Sure.
So thank you for the information. I think that, my concern is, are you going to have sprinkler systems installed near the charging stations in case some disaster happens?
So that's also part of the discussion. There will be a dry system,
Okay.
sprinkler system in there for sure.
Okay,
Yeah. Water is the name of the game in that scenario.
yeah, okay. I just want to make sure that's on the radar screen, so that's great. And you said, so Each of the units is gonna have their own compressor on the roof,
Yes.
and then basically everyone's gonna be billed separately?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification, I appreciate that.
Any other questions, comments? Counselor Landers?
Yes, I'm very pleased with your handout here. I think that was a good way to present the, I guess you call them the design guidelines, the approved and then the revised per settlement. I think it's a good way to present it. So when I do the comparison, I find the revised, much more appealing. As far as the red brick, that's not a bricklayer's individual brick, it's sheets of,
No, it's actual brick.
Huh?
It's actual brick.
is that right? Oh, boy, there's gonna be a lot of bricklaying, huh?
It's a lot of brick.
Yeah, I find the building and the new design with of course, the red brick, and I think it was Councilor over across the way there that was pushing for the red brick, which we all like. I think not enjoyed, but I looked at the work you're gonna do on Exchange and High Street. Those are necessary, I think, for water control and everything, but it's gonna make those two streets look a heck of a lot better. And, of course, parking, I'm very, very, very pleased with that. I gotta throw this bit in. I don't think you're gonna have a heck of a lot of landscaping to do, though.
I'll interject. Priscilla Ryder will make sure that there's a ton of landscaping. She's already looked at the plans and already mentioned that.
Very interesting. I'll have to talk to her on that. It must be gonna put some of the plants on the roof, I'm not sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I might think of a few other things, but overall, I was very, very pleased with this, Madam Chair.
Counselor Navin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. David, thanks for this discussion. As you guys are aware, I was one of the counselors who voted no on this originally. And even though the yes was what landed us into further discussions with some limitations, I was a hard no from the beginning. It came down, I used to be the Ward 6 City Councilor, which this is not in Ward 6, but it is adjacent to it. And as Councilor Facilla knows, many of the streets that would have been impacted by the Bolton Street lot and the use of the Bolton Street lot are directly in that ward. It was very concerning, I would say, and I think some of the councilors had, really voiced some frustration about kind of the lack of collaboration between the prior proponents and the council. And you guys have stepped up, and I just want to say thank you publicly. Our conversations, they're always cordial, but right, no matter who comes in, but you guys from the start did want to look to see how we could get to yes. And, not to say that, the conversation about whether it could have been higher or not, you guys looked for new ways. And, originally we were told it's not possible, it's not economically feasible, we're not doing it, this is it. And you guys really did find a way to increase on the parking. This is a dramatically improved project, in my opinion. It was too many units, it was not enough parking, it was gonna have a huge impact on downtown, and now it's less units, way more parking, and it's going to have a benefit for downtown. The reduction, that we began with of being concerned about losing the commercial space didn't materialize because you guys tried to be creative about it. And I think we appreciate that. The last thing we need is to close off that end of downtown where it's not even finished on Main Street yet. By providing, the city and especially yourselves as the owners with the ability to get kind of a marquee client and tenant in there, can really help benefit our community. We've seen a lot of good progress on Main Street over the past few years, and hopefully this can kind of help us move in that direction. So appreciate that. And the design aesthetic is significantly better. I'm glad you said it about the yellow and the creams and the improvements there. I will just take a note, in full disclosure, I was at an event down in the South Shore this morning with David, and we were able to see some of the completed project that you're doing up in Haverhill. Is that right?
It'll be wrapping up at the end of this year.
Okay. And, and some other projects that they're working on in the South Shore. And I have to say the work that the company has done is impressive. And, sometimes we have developers that come in here and say a lot of things and, they don't always pan out. Hopefully, we're still at the very early stages here. But it's nice to see some of the completed projects that really do have a nice shine in the community. So I will stop there, and we'll keep going.
Counselor Orem?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. Just so you know, I don't serve on this committee, but I just have a few questions for you. I believe it may have happened prior, but I'm not for sure. First, these are apartments, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, I heard you say rentals. And second, what's the affordability component here?
This does not include affordable.
You have no affordability into these units. Okay. And then another question related to the documents you submitted, and I drew up the plan of Marlborough right in that area, and I utilize that area quite a bit for a breakfast facility right across the street from you, which is very good, but you also have a restaurant right next to you. When the construction occurs, there will be workers. Do you expect to know what the maximum amount of workers are per day?
So that's something that I'd have to lean on my construction team for. I can't tell you the number at the top of my head. We will have to develop a construction management plan, which is going to be part of the conditions it will involve, because I could understand there'd be a concern about usurping the parking for the local businesses.
You hit it right on the button.
We
We're
understand
watching a large facility go up on Lincoln Street, and there's quite a few people, but they're on site right now, and it's a bigger site. You're in a very, unfortunately, tight area. So that would be my concern, is that we recognize and make sure that it's reviewed in site plan review of where people will be parking during construction. We understand what you're planning for the actual facility, but where will the contractors park during construction?
So we'll have to get back to you with the plan, and we can make that something we do in the immediate short term. Because I do know that there are multiple parking facilities obviously in the area, and I can't say that I can speak to what their daytime capacity are, whether it's the parking garage or other. I will note that we also have another project over on Boston Post Road that we have assumed, the 339 Boston Post Road project. We will also be building that. And I don't know if there's any synergy with that project site as well, as where we could, perhaps if we really needed to, shuttle parking over there. But the desire would be to have people where they're actually going to be most likely to park, which would be in the downtown area, but restricting them to places where they're not going to impact the local businesses. The garage over here, if there is capacity, and you guys could speak better to this than I would be able to anecdotally, how well utilized that is during the day, but the direction we could receive would be helpful.
I appreciate you looking into that. And the other thing we saw for the Lincoln Street project is the traffic from the contractors going through residential neighborhoods to take shortcuts. Our traffic's already very difficult during rush hours and so forth, during the heavy time periods. So I plan on asking the Site Plan Review Committee to look into that. I don't know if this committee can do that or the council, but I think it's very important that you have a plan in place on where the contractors will park, as well as all your contractors bringing in materials, what roads will they be using, and hoping that they will not be going through residential neighborhoods that are tight roads, and it became an issue on, not yours, but up on Lincoln Street. The other note too is that, you will help our restaurants when you have them all in here, so that's a great part of it, but do you have an idea what the market rate will be for these apartments?
The rent?
Yes.
So I off the top of my head, I don't know them. I do know that obviously rent is high everywhere. So I couldn't speak to the exact numbers. Rents are in that $2,000 to $3,000 range now for an apartment, just depending on the size, and that's pretty much universal throughout Massachusetts. There's obviously a pretty significant stock of rental housing over by 495. It probably will be similar in rent to that. But we believe that there is going to be a desire for some folks to not want to live out by the office buildings and rather live downtown. And if those people do work out there and they come in downtown, we do think that there's going to be a big benefit to the businesses and the restaurants down here by creating more customers that get to know downtown, create more activity.
And hopefully, as time goes on, we can work with you on public transportation. Unfortunately, we're limited here, but the less use of cars, the better. Hopefully, many of your residents will work at home most of the week. Sometimes you do have to go in now and then. But, my concern will still be the traffic impact and the parking impact of this facility, and especially the other issues I mentioned during construction, at where the contractors park and how they utilize the roads. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anybody else? And if not, I'm going to I'm sorry, Counselor Doucette?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure no one else, before I go, asks another set of questions, so I appreciate that. So a couple of things were brought up. You talked about Boston Post Road. You're talking about the McGee Farm area? Okay. I just wanted to know if that was the one. So I noticed looking through the plans, the top floor, the back units, they have very extensive balconies. Are those dedicated to those units? Okay. And are you doing anything for bike racks or anything else like that?
That's a good question. I actually don't know what we have for bike parking off the top of my head, but that is something that is important, both just for renters as well as obviously for managing single occupancy vehicle trips, and we're willing to make some commitments on the number of spaces, beyond just a nominal amount. So that is something that we can certainly make sure we can get you information on.
Appreciate that. So 85 has bike lanes on both sides. Route 20 is going to have bike lanes on both sides. Oh, by the way, remember that for
And you have a
Boston
rail
Post
trail.
Road as well. But, with the rail trail and all this, it's, the bikes are being much more enabled, and I've seen overall a lot more bike activities over the last couple of years, so.
Yeah, the rail trail is great. In fact, with I used to work for the developer who did the Hudson Mills project, which runs right alongside that. It's pretty fantastic, and I do think that that'll be a strong thing to include. And I appreciate the suggestion, because there are a lot of places to bike to from downtown Marlborough.
From here, yes, and bike too, so yes, absolutely. Thank you.
And just, if I may, to Mr. Oren's point, I think that we could include in the conditions, if it's not in there, a review by the site plan committee of our construction management plan. We just went through that on Boston Post Road, and I do think that's entirely appropriate to ask questions about truck circulation and routing and obviously construction.
It is in there.
Okay, so
We'll
And
review.
Madam
Do you have
Chair, just
another
one
question,
additional
Counselor
question
Oren?
was at the bottom of my notes, and thank you for that input. We're learning a lot from the big project going up on Lincoln Street. The parking for the retail use, I know you said you have 3,500 square feet. Where is that being considered for that?
So that is what, we're expecting that to operate the way most other businesses in the downtown on this side do, which is there is public parking available. And I know that it's probably more difficult during the winter than during this time of year, but the goal will be people park in the garage or on street, and they walk and they go to the businesses and they find their way across to the other side of downtown and don't just stay over here.
Well, and that's great, and I would suggest you talk to your neighbors, they're running into it as well, parking that they're already dealing with. Might it be Jake's or Funky Murphy's?
Yep.
Those two facilities, depending on the time of day, depending on the week, if it's weekend, there's a lot of difficulty parking, so it would be great if, once you start working your way in, maybe to start a group discussion on best bets for parking to help all three of you, all three retailers down there.
Thank you. I think one of the things that we will emphasize with any tenants is the management of employee parking. So that actually becomes a bigger challenge, is that as you bring businesses into these downtown districts, if you don't manage it well, they start to take the best spaces away from customers, and it's not in their best interest. But it's something that has to be written into their lease and managed. So one of the things we can do is, obviously we'll have to figure out how our own parking is utilized as well. It is for the residents, but if there, the way that the parking is rented in a building like this is separate from the leases. So if there happens to be, and I don't necessarily expect there to be, but if there happens to be not a full utilization of the parking as an option to manage for employees, would be the ideal user, and we could rent those out to them as well.
And on that point, if I may, very good point you just brought up, because you're going to have deliveries. We're in a world where food's getting delivered, your meals are getting delivered, UPS, Amazon, so hopefully you'll have a dedicated area for them to zoom in and zoom out. But
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges, I've had an opportunity to be part of many projects that have restaurants in these kind of scenarios. The deliveries for some, and obviously the goal as a restaurant was certainly not something we can guarantee, but we're putting all the provisions in necessary to bring them in. That's a difficult business to bring in. It's something that's a goal. I want to make that clear. And by the way, if anyone does know of anyone who wants to operate a restaurant, please send them our way. We'd love to talk to them. But food deliveries, are fairly difficult to manage, but would probably, have to figure out a way to manage them out front. What I could imagine being a concern would be double parking. So we'll have to think about that. It's not something that I don't think we've addressed adequately yet.
as time moves on, that's a great consideration, and to talk with your neighbors. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, any other questions, comments before? Okay, we're going to begin going through the amended site plan approval with conditions. So it is the fact that it has Marlborough TOTG LLC as the owner, is that a,
They are still the owner of the land.
Okay.
We have not closed on the land. JW Capital Partners still is technically the applicant. We've assumed control of the agreement with Marlborough TOTG from them, but, you know, they're still on paper the applicant.
okay. So we have the revised plans, all of that is on the record. The conditions, I am not going to be reading every single word in this, just to kind of help get through it. I'll just kind of try to summarize and go through the main points. A is site conformance, so construction of the site will be conformance with the approved site plans, which site plan review has looked at. Number 2, all construction on the site shall conform to the appropriate national, state, and city of Marlborough codes and regulations in force, subject to minor changes approved by the building commissioner. The code and regulations shall include, but are not limited to, state building, plumbing, wiring, NFPDA, DPW, utility roads, noise, and signs. B, prior to issuance of a building permit, construction, staging, and safety plan. A, the applicant shall complete the project in accordance with the construction, staging, and safety plan to be submitted for review and approval by the Site Plan Review Committee at a regularly scheduled meeting. Said construction plan shall address the building demolition phase and may take place in advance of the construction phase and under a separate demolition permit. B, the construction plan shall provide detailed information concerning the areas of the site, traffic management, blocked sidewalks, blocked streets, pedestrian protection, construction fencing, and dedicated illuminated and covered pedestrian walkways adjacent to the structure. The sequencing of the construction of the project, access to active hydrants, and an emergency operation plan during construction. C, any deviation to the approved construction plan shall be approved by the building commissioner. Number 2 is the green design. The building plan shall show compliance with section 650-34D2M of the zoning ordinance concerning sustainable building design. The residential units shall have all electric utilities, including heat, air conditioning, and hot water, and the applicant shall use best efforts to provide all electric utilities in the non-residential portions of the project. Number 3, design standards. The building plan shall show compliance with section 650-34, a purpose and vision for development of the design standards, noting the purpose of the design standards, and we went through all of that already. Number 4 is the rooftop mechanicals. On the building plans, the elevation drawings shall show areas reserved for rooftop mechanicals. The building commissioner shall confirm that the building drawings conform to the requirements of section 650-34D2B. What is deleted in red is number 5, footings, which was a question that I had asked at site plan. There was language in there about the footings located within the city of Marlborough. That has been deleted because you've determined it's not an issue?
Yeah, I'm not sure why that was in
correct?
there, to be honest with you.
Okay. I think it was an issue for a project on Main Street where we knew it was going to be within the city layout.
Got it. We're pulled back, so we will be okay.
C is construction. Number 1, the pre-construction meeting. Prior to commencement of construction, a meeting shall be held on-site with the building commissioner, the city engineer, conservation officer, fire chief, police chief, and the site contractor. At this meeting, officials will review the plans and conditions, exchange contact information, and a similar meeting shall be held prior to the commencement of demolition, which may take place under a separate demolition permit. Number 2, use of ways during construction. Consistent with the construction plan, all areas for construction staging and offloading for building materials shall be coordinated to maximize public safety and to minimize interference with the customary use of sidewalk. use of public ways by vehicles and pedestrians. Permits are required for any street or sidewalk excavations. The police chief shall have discretion and authority to require additional protection, and the applicant shall pay to the city the cost for police details. Number 3 is OSHA. The contractor shall abide by OSHA regs. Number 4, safety official. The applicant site contractor shall have on the site at all times a qualified construction safety official. Number 5, hours of operation in accordance with section 431 3B of the Code of the City of Marlborough. Excavation machinery may be operated only during the normal work week from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., except Sunday, when all use is prohibited, except with variance by the Board of Health. And the normal work week is considered from Monday through Saturday. And I was sort of amazed to see how much work is taking place on both Lincoln Street projects on Saturdays. So for the public, I would,
Typically, Saturday is not something we do unless a project gets behind schedule.
and I think that's probably why they are pushing Saturdays to get that project to go, but I was surprised. Number 6, DPW coordination. Any proposed utility work in Main Street must be coordinated with the city engineer. Number 7, pest control. Pest control shall be implemented throughout the duration of the project. So I guess this is where we can have the discussion on the suggested language from Priscilla. Do you object to having that sentence? I'm sorry, this is actually from the Board of Health. A pest control plan shall be submitted to the Board of Health for review and approval prior to construction to ensure pests are controlled prior to demolition and throughout construction. We are having a rat problem in the city, and so I think this is a new request from the Board of Health. To kind of-
We have no issue with that whatsoever.
So
That's
we will add that to
I don't care.
number 7. I'm sorry, did you?
May
have a
I
question?
ask a question? Yeah, David,
Councilor.
just if you could speak to any of the other projects you have where do you guys already use pest
Bill
control
could
either?
better speak to that. He has actually a very similar project he's managing in downtown Beverly.
Yeah, before we disturb any soil or do any demolition, we have pest control in place. We have weekly inspections by licensed pest control management, and then once we get substantially complete, then we'll get rid of the pest control.
Okay. And do you go out a certain radius from the project itself, or do you guys, have you used that in Beverly?
So in Beverly, we talked to the Board of Health of what their regulations were. So when we sign up the pest control inspector, then we will have a conversation with the Board of Health to make sure we're both in compliance with each other.
Great, thank you.
All right, and that's really all this is asking, that you submit to the Board of Health for review your plan. So if you're good with
No
that,
objection with that language.
All right, number D is stormwater. 1 is siltation control. The applicant and site contractor shall be responsible for protecting the city drainage system with erosion controls. The applicant shall engage the services of additional professionals as deemed necessary by the conservation officer and city engineer to ensure those erosion controls. Number 2 is stormwater management and a maintenance plan. Prior to the issuance of the final certificate of occupancy, the applicant shall provide the city engineer with the final stormwater management and maintenance plan. The applicant shall also include a copy of the snow removal protocol. Number 3 is annual reports. An annual maintenance report shall be provided to the city engineer and the conservation officer by June 1st of each year, reporting on the maintenance and operation procedures. Number 4, the issuance of this decision confirms compliance with Marlborough Code, Chapter 271, Stormwater Management, and shall serve as the stormwater management permit. E, landscaping. Number 1, prior to the installation of trees, the applicant shall meet at the site with conservation officer to verify the adequacy of tree planting. Number 2, modifications to the approved plans shall receive prior written approval of the conservation officer. Number 3, site visit prior to the final sign-off. The landscape architect shall provide an as-built planting plan and a letter that the plan conforms to the approved plans. The conservation officer shall confirm by a site visit that everything has been installed accordingly. Number 4 is replacement of the plantings. Following 18 months of final sign-off, anything that's died will be replaced. Number 5, mulch placement. Installation of mulch at the time of planting and thereafter shall be placed so that the mulch is not in contact with the trunk of a newly planted tree and shrubs as shown on the details. And number 6 is maintenance. Landscaping shall be properly maintained, replaced if necessary, and kept in good condition in compliance with landscape plans. Number 7, all landscaped areas shall be served by subsurface irrigation or other means to ensure that the plants planted will survive. Number 8, where feasible, substitution of native pollinator plant species shall be made after discussions between the landscape architect and conservation officer to determine what alternative plants to use. And number 9, snow removal. There shall be no area designated for snow storage. All snow shall be removed from the site. F is parking and the parking garage. Number 1, the design of the parking garage shall be such that entering and exiting is controlled by authorized users. 2, the parking garage is intended for use by the residents of the site, not intended for public use. Number 3, the applicant shall provide a minimum of 80 parking spaces on site. Number 4, applicant shall not seek to use the city-owned Bolton Street lot. Number 5, all EV charging stations shall be located at the lowest level of the parking garage. Number 6, horizontal openings shall be enlarged to the maximum extent practicable to maximize natural ventilation. And number 7, plans shall include and designate the car share parking spaces on the final plans per section 650-34E3 of the ordinance. A copy of the contract regarding car share services shall be provided. G is other conditions. So improvements to Main, Exchange, and High Streets. The project shall include the replacement of the concrete sidewalk adjacent to Main Street along the property frontage. The applicant shall grant a permanent easement to the city of Marlborough for the purpose of widening the paved width of Exchange Street at no cost to the city. There's a whole lot of language in there about what's happening on Exchange Street that we went through when this was originally done, so hopefully people don't have too many questions on that. Number 2, work within the public way. All work within the public way layout, including but not limited to planting, repaving, milling, shall be completed prior to the issuance of the final certificate of occupancy. Number 3 is the as-built plans. They must be submitted to the city engineer for review prior to the issuance of the final certificate of occupancy. Number 4, time of completion. Work as provided for on the site plan shall be carried into effect and completed within 2 years following the date of issuance of the building permit, unless the city council grants an extension. Number 5, signage. Pursuant to section 650-34I, the city council retains jurisdiction over all signage of the project. While we're on the signage, I know there was the point from the city engineer about the left turn and right turn. Will you add
And I wanted to discuss
those?
that with him specifically. First of all, the regulation of the streets is obviously going to be how the city deems to regulate their own public ways. So we'll abide by whatever it is they desire. I was a little confused because I only saw this for the first time this evening. The exit on High Street and restricting them to lefts. At the end of Exchange, you can only go right. I'm not sure, is that stretch of High two-way adjacent to it? Is it, okay. We don't have any objection to whatever the city sees is going to be the best management of the circulation of the roads. I think
Coming up Exchange, you can
only go right.
only turn right, but when you're on High, you can, because you're coming out of the church parking lot, you
You can go, yeah, you can
left.
go, there's
So
a
this
short
is-
stint of it there that you can go, it's two-way.
Okay, so it's just, I wanted to make sure we're not creating a scenario where it's in conflict with current circulation. There's really no major issue for us. I think that any left or right turn restriction means you have to at most drive a half block one way or the other to get to the same place, so really,
Madam Chair.
no problem here.
Counselor Nabin.
Just, and this is just a question that I'd like to get clarification from the engineer. As he talks about this, the first time I saw it tonight, I do wonder just the reasoning on it, just thinking about when I drive by this in the morning and the evening, that particular part of Bolton Street gets awfully crowded. And so if they're going left only out of High Street, they're dumping onto Bolton Street right near the preschool and either into a long line of traffic that's stuck at that light on Main and Bolton.
At
And
3 o'clock,
yeah, so like,
but after that.
correct. So I'm curious then to know how that will impact rush hour and may be sensitive to it, considering all the utility work that's being done on Lincoln Street may be changing that traffic pattern, but if we could get some clarification.
And he's not here, and I'm not sure, but I think his concern is cars that know they want to go north on 85 may turn left out of Exchange and go up to High, which would be interfering with cars coming right out of the High Street one, and there's a
You
lot
can't
of...
do that today, because you can only, if you were to go left out of, or Exchange curb cut to go up to High, you'd have to go right as it is presently signed. We certainly don't want to send people that way, that stretch of High. going
Brown
around the back.
Street,
It's
right.
not a place to be sending any volume of traffic. So I think we're more than open to whatever restrictions the city deems appropriate. I actually think that the right turn only at the end of Exchange, I think, is a little strange, that it does seem like the place you would not want to send people, given the narrowness of that road and how it terminates in that really strange intersection today. But again, these are the city's streets. We'll abide by whatever desires. I just didn't think any of this was appropriate to put into an order of conditions, since it's really out of our control, and we're willing to work with you. So if there needs to be a condition associated with it, would be the applicant agrees to abide by the traffic circulation patterns that the city engineer just deems appropriate.
Okay, and maybe that, I know part of site plan is typically all the signage stuff, and the signage stuff includes all of that sort of left turn, right turn.
And we're willing to work with you, and we're willing to, if it comes down to the dollars are necessary to establish signage. In the terms of a project like this, it's relatively small dollars, and it's certainly something we could, commit to implementing the signage that the city engineer agrees is appropriate. I just want to make sure that that's not something that's done as part of this without any sort of robust discussion. I don't know if you have a traffic commissioner or anyone that makes these decisions, but it seems like that's where this should be discussed and not necessarily in our project, and we'll just agree to fund whatever comes out of that in terms of signage.
We do have a traffic commission with the city engineer on the commission, so I think that that's one of the things. I know
I'm just figuring it should be
for
decided
the
there, not in
project
this.
that's across from you that's being built on Granger, there is language within that one for the people exiting theirs because they're on a one-way street. So it's not unusual for them to have that kind of concern. So I guess it
It's not
makes...
misinterpreted as an objection, I just want to make sure that it's discussed.
No, and if we can work out the language, I see Counselor Ossing's hand, so maybe he has some input.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is usually best left for the site plan. I mean, if you want to put a condition that says the site plan will determine traffic patterns out of there, that's fine, but the applicant is correct, that's usually a negotiation. The city engineer is trying to make sure we're not funneling people down towards Exchange High and down into the neighborhood up there, right? I mean, that's what they're trying to keep everybody either going towards Bolton Street or towards Main Street and stay off of the High Street into the neighborhood in the back.
We don't disagree with that desire. It's a reasonable request.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So maybe we can let the legal department determine if it's better to add it into the parking section of this, because it is related more to the parking garage and access than into signage, which is really talking more about the fact that we retain jurisdiction over signage that requires a sign permit. Those kind of signs don't require sign permits. So that there is something that it's more site plan discussion, and let them make that decision. And you can have the conversation with Mr. DePercio and maybe the chief of police at that pre-construction meeting.
Yeah, I think like a walk and kind of a talk through of like how this would all operate. I mean, I don't really necessarily feel the need to get a traffic engineer involved on our end. We're certainly willing to work with the city.
So you're okay with us adding some language somewhere that it
Absolutely
would be
okay
up
with
to
the- with-
site
with
plan review
language. I just
to?
think that the specificity at this point, I want to make sure that this is more than just one email that's gone off and suddenly we're committing to a signage program. That's
Okay.
all.
Yeah, Madam Chair, so if you go back to Raising Cane's, you go back to Chipotle, those were all items that they decided on at site plan. I mean, so if you want to say, hey, site plan will decide traffic flow signage or something to that effect, that could work, but
Yep.
that's usually a site plan discussion.
Everybody's okay with that, and we can let legal determine where exactly it should go when they get this to put into proper legal form, if it's vague rather than the specific. Okay. H is general provisions. Number 1, minor changes. The city council delegates site plan review committee the authority to approve minor changes. There is in red, for avoidance of doubt, facade adjustments to maximize airflow in the garage are minor changes that have been delegated to site plan review committee.
One note
Chair.
on this, I apologize.
I think this is
Counselor
where the
Austin?
applicant had, there's a difference between number of units and number of bedrooms. I think the number of units is 92, the number
Oh.
of bedrooms is
We have
whatever.
132, we'll get it corrected.
Okay.
I believe because we're 42 bedrooms, so it should be 130.
Okay, or increase the total number of bedrooms. Do you want it to keep that but change the number that's there, or do you want that to be the total number of units?
That's the number of units, and they're not all one bedroom, so that was a simple, just a typo.
All right. So,
Madam Chair?
Counselor Doucette.
Thank you very much. So just for my own clarification, is it going to be total number of units above 92, or? is
That's
it-
actually probably a good point. We could both reference the total number of residential units above 92 and the number of bedrooms above 132. There's two different numbers there.
Right, I'd rather see them both.
And then we're fine with that.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
So
I
the
just want to,
total,
we'll confirm the 132.
I'm pretty sure that's what it is, but yeah, we'll confirm it.
Speak now or hold it.
so you're not going to increase the number of residential units or
Beyond 92,
beyond the 92, or increase the total number of bedrooms
above
above?
132, and we just need to
32.
clarify that that number is correct. I'm very sure, but
All right, we'll make sure that that language is clarified.
obviously the plans that have been submitted have those numbers on them, but nonetheless, for avoidance of doubt, let's get it right.
Number 2 is phasing. A final certificate of occupancy shall not be issued until the applicant has complied with all the conditions of the decision. And the city council delegates to the site plan review committee the authority to approve the phasing of work. Number 3 is enforcement. The city council designates the building commissioner as the enforcing authority. And that is all the language of this. So I believe,
Madam Chair, question.
I'm sorry, who had?
A
Counsel
question.
Orm.
The email that we received today from, I guess they had a site plan review committee today too on this. The information relayed by Bill Payton, our building commissioner, on light plan as well as egress, is that something that would be part of the conditions?
No, they're going to add them to the plan set, which we received a rolled-up huge copy of a plan set last week.
So if I,
They're going to be modified to include a page that has the lighting plan.
The only thing I need to clarify with my team is the timing of that and whether or not we can get that completed in time for, the timeline for the vote. So I do think that we want to make sure we're clear. If that was a condition, that could be prior to building permit, that the site plan review committee or something to that effect has received and reviewed and approved of a lighting plan, that it conforms with the code. Is there something we could?
I'm going to guess you're not going to get a building permit without those plans.
Understood.
So I'm not too concerned about them making sure that they have that.
Sure.
And I wouldn't know if it was good or bad or anyway. So
I just want to make sure it
Counselor
didn't need to be, I just want to make sure we didn't need it in like the next week or two and.
Not from my point. Counselor Ossing.
that's correct, Madam Chair. So the lighting plans and the egress, those will all be taken care of in site plan. Because typically, as we approve this, we say it's good, but site plan will tweak it, because they'll go back to site plan one more time, and they'll adjust it, but it won't have to come back to us because it'll be minor in nature.
Yeah, in the case of this project, the lighting is fairly limited. This isn't a big outdoor parking lot, so.
And I'm happy with that. It's listed on the email, so this is part of the record, so it's either within the orders of conditions, the order of conditions, or at site plan. It's gonna get checked one way or the other, so thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, so unless there is further discussion, further questions, motion would be in order to approve the amended site plan.
Motion to approve the amended site plan, subject to legal's final draft.
I will ask for suspension at Monday's meeting to refer this to the solicitor, which would then get it on the first meeting in June. so we can be ahead of the deadline and hopefully help you then meet funding things that you need. All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the amended and restated site plan approval with conditions. Is there final discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. We are missing one of our members because he has a conflict. But, all right, so I will, as I said, I will report this out on Monday. I will ask for the suspension to refer to the solicitor. He can go through, make sure he's added in anything that we talked about tonight, and have it on the agenda for the future. So you're welcome to come Monday, but you don't really need to.
Motion to adjourn?
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right,
Thank you very much for your time.
We are adjourned at 9:05.
Joe, for this charge.